The rain had already washed away the footprints when Officer Daniels arrived. All that was left was a broken scaffold, a girl who refused to speak, and a single wool mitten lying in the mud. No one thought twice about it. Just a child's glove, soaked and torn. But Rex, Daniels's German Shepherd partner, wouldn't leave it alone. He sniffed it, carried it, guarded it, like treasure. And that small act was the beginning of everything. Because what the others didn't see, Rex somehow did. The girl's trembling eyes, the whispered warning, "Don't let them find it." Hours later, that mitten would reveal a secret powerful enough to destroy a department. But for now, it was just rain, a frightened child, and a loyal dog who wouldn't walk away. Sometimes, truth doesn't scream. It hides, in a single act of trust, between a girl and her dog. The storm came without warning. Rain slashed through the night like broken glass, drumming against the steel skeleton of an unfinished building. Sirens wailed in the distance, thin, ghostly cries swallowed by thunder. Officer Daniel Daniels tightened his grip on the flashlight and glanced down at the dark silhouette moving beside him. Rex, his German Shepherd partner, waited for the next signal, every muscle taut, every breath precise. They had been on the trail for hours, chasing whispers of a child trafficking ring that operated like smoke, visible for a heartbeat, then gone. The tip-off had led them to this half-built structure on the edge of town, a place where rust and rain smelled like secrets. "Easy, boy," Daniels murmured. Rex's ears flicked, nose pressed low to the mud. Lightning flashed. For a single instant, the beams and scaffolds glowed white, revealing footprints leading into the main hall. Small ones. A child's. Daniel's pulse quickened. "You've got it, partner. Lead on." Rex moved forward silently, paws splashing through shallow puddles. The beam of Daniels's flashlight danced over slabs of concrete, twisted rebar, the skeletal remains of a stairwell. The wind carried a faint sound, not quite a sob, more like a breath caught in fear. Daniels froze. Rex stopped too, head tilting toward the noise. Then it came again. A whimper. Barely audible. Human. They followed it around a stack of cement bags, down to a hollow under collapsed scaffolding. There, curled beneath a sheet of plastic, was a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Her face was streaked with grime. Her hair clung to her cheeks. She trembled, both hands clutching something small and frayed. Level moderate, a single wool mitten. Daniels lowered himself slowly. "Hey there," he whispered, voice soft enough to soothe the storm. "You're safe now. I'm Officer Daniels. This is Rex." The girl didn't answer. Her wide eyes flicked between him and the dog. When Rex took a step closer, she tensed. But he stopped, sitting down quietly, head low, tail still. He waited. The moment stretched. Then, almost imperceptibly, the girl extended a shaking hand and touched his fur. That small act, fragile, trembling, broke something in the silence. Rex exhaled softly and nudged her palm. She let out a sob and buried her face against his neck. Daniels felt a lump rise in his throat. He took off his jacket, wrapping it around her thin shoulders. "It's okay, sweetheart. We've got you now." Her voice was barely a whisper against the rain. Don't let them find it." He frowned. "Find what?" But she didn't answer. Her lips moved once more, maybe to say his name, maybe to pray. And then she went limp, unconscious from exhaustion. For a second, only the storm spoke. Daniels lifted her gently, feeling the small weight against his chest. The mitten slipped from her fingers. Rex caught it with his mouth, carrying it carefully as they made their way out. Outside, red and blue lights pulsed against the rain-slick concrete. Paramedics shouted directions. Daniels placed the girl onto a stretcher, his jacket still wrapped around her. One medic checked her pulse and nodded, weak but steady. Rex stood beside him, soaked to the bone, the mitten still in his jaws. When Daniels reached down to take it, he hesitated. The fabric was damp and coarse, stitched by hand, the yarn unraveling at the cuff. There was nothing remarkable about it, and yet, as he turned it over, something tugged at him. Instinct. A whisper that this tiny object carried a story too heavy for words. He slipped the mitten into his pocket and looked at the girl being lifted into the ambulance. The siren flared to life again, echoing through the night. Rex whined softly. Daniels rested a hand on his neck. She said not to let them find it, he murmured. But what did she mean, boy? Rex only looked up at him, eyes sharp, unblinking, as if he already knew. The ambulance doors slammed shut. Its light sliced through the darkness, casting fleeting reflections on the puddles where they stood. Daniels watched it disappear down the road, swallowed by rain and distance. In the sudden quiet, thunder rolled low across the sky. Rex pressed his head gently against Daniels's leg, grounding him in the moment. Daniels exhaled, long and heavy. "Good work tonight," he said, though his voice wavered. He looked once more at the pocket where the mitten rested, feeling its shape through the fabric. Soft, fragile, inexplicably important. Behind them, the abandoned construction site loomed, a dark mouth that had swallowed too many secrets. The rain began to ease, tapering into a slow drizzle. The smell of wet earth replaced the sting of concrete dust. Daniels took one last glance toward the shadows where they had found her. A single piece of yellow tape fluttered in the wind. The words, "Police line, do not cross," blurring beneath the droplets. Somewhere inside, a loose sheet of metal clanged faintly, like a memory refusing to fade. He turned to Rex. "Come on, partner. Let's go home." The German shepherd trotted beside him, ears perked, every step precise and loyal. Together they walked into the thinning rain, the sirens fading behind them. Unaware that the small, sodden mitten in Daniels's pocket carried the truth that would soon unravel everything, fade to the red-blue shimmer of ambulance lights cutting through the night. The hospital at midnight hummed like a sleeping city. Fluorescent lights flickered above pale linoleum floors, washing everything in shades of silver and fatigue. Beyond the glass doors of room 214, the little girl lay still under a thin white blanket, her small frame barely rising with each breath. Machines whispered. A heart monitor drew slow, stubborn beats against the quiet. She had been conscious for hours now, the nurses said, eyes open, lips closed. No name, no word, no sound, except the soft hitch of breath when someone tried to ask too much. The doctors called it trauma. The social workers called it shock. Whatever the label, the silence felt heavier than the rain outside. Officer Daniels stood just beyond the doorway, cap in hand. His uniform, still damp from the storm, clung to him like a shadow he couldn't shake. Beside him sat Rex, posture straight, gaze fixed on the girl. The shepherd hadn't taken his eyes off her since they arrived. He had refused to wait outside, settling instead at the foot of her bed, with quiet authority, as if guarding a secret no one else could see. A nurse whispered, "She's calm when he's here." Daniels nodded. "Yeah, he has that effect on people." The nurse smiled faintly, then left them alone. Inside the room, the soft beeping filled the pauses between breaths. Daniels stepped closer. The smell of antiseptic and rain-drenched leather mingled in the air. The girl's hair, now brushed clean, fanned across the pillow like ink on paper. Her right hand, small, fragile, still clutched the single wool mitten he'd returned to her earlier. Someone had tried to wash it, but the fibers had curled, the color dulled to a tired gray. He pulled up a chair and sat beside her, not speaking. Silence, he'd learned, was sometimes kinder than questions. Rex shifted slightly, ears twitching at the faint buzz of the lights. After a long while, her eyes fluttered open. She looked at Rex first, not at the officer, not at the machines, just at the dog. The faintest trace of recognition crossed her face. She reached out, hesitant at first, then, with more certainty, her fingertips brushing his ear. "You remember, right?" she whispered. The words were soft, barely a ripple in the air, but they hit Daniels like a wave. Rex tilted his head, tail thumping once against the floor. A silent yes. The girl's eyes glistened, not quite tears, more like relief, trying to find its way out. Daniels leaned forward. "Rex remembers everyone who needs him," he said gently. "And he doesn't forget." She looked at him then, directly. And for the first time he saw the weight behind those young eyes. Not just fear, but knowledge. Something she shouldn't have had to carry. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. She turned her face toward the window, where raindrops slid down the glass like trails of light. From the hallway, two social workers watched through the door's narrow window pane, murmuring in low voices. "She's still mute, probably dissociative," one said. "She's been through hell," the other replied. "We'll need a child psychologist." Daniels heard every word. He also heard the quiet rumble that came from Rex. Not a growl, but a low sound of discomfort. As if the dog, too, knew that words weren't enough to fix what had been broken. He sighed and rubbed Rex's shoulder. "Easy, boy." Then to the girl, "They say you're safe now, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way, does it?" Her eyes flicked toward him, startled by the truth in his tone. She said nothing, but her fingers tightened around the mitten, twisting, pressing, as though something precious was hidden there. Daniels noticed. His brow furrowed, but he didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, he took out his notebook and wrote down a few things. Meaningless, perhaps, but it gave his hands somewhere to go. Minutes passed. The rain outside softened to a whisper. The fluorescent hum faded beneath the rhythmic tick of the wall clock. The girl's breathing steadied. Her eyelids grew heavy again. Daniels stood, pulling the blanket a little higher over her shoulder. "You rest now," he said softly. "You did good tonight." As he turned to leave, Rex remained seated by her side. Daniels hesitated, watching as the girl's small hand slipped from the mitten and came to rest against Rex's paw. The dog didn't move. He simply lowered his head until their fingers and fur touched, eyes half closed, steady and patient, as if guarding a promise only they understood. Daniels swallowed hard. Something inside him whispered that this was no ordinary rescue. The words, "Don't let them find it," echoed faintly in his mind, threading through the quiet room like a ghost. He crouched beside Rex, voice low. "There's more to this, isn't there?" Rex looked up, eyes reflecting the dim hospital light. Unwavering, resolute. It wasn't an answer, but Daniels felt it anyway. That instinct again. The one that had saved lives, solved cases, and now tugged at the edge of his soul. He brushed a hand over Rex's head. "All right, partner," he murmured. "We're not done here." The words hung in the sterile air, soft but firm, a promise sealed between man and dog. Outside the window, the storm finally gave way to silence. Streetlights shimmered through the drizzle, painting faint halos across the wet glass. In the bed, the girl slept again, her hand still resting on Rex's paw, the mitten tucked close to her chest. Daniel straightened, watching them for a moment longer. Then he turned off the overhead light, leaving the room in a wash of moonlit gray. The door clicked shut behind him. In the hallway, he paused. The distant echo of rain on metal rooftops faded into the hum of the hospital. Somewhere deep in his chest, the question formed again. What did she mean? But he knew the answer wouldn't come tonight. Rex padded out behind him, silent as a shadow, his fur still damp, his eyes still locked on the door they had left behind. Together they walked down the corridor, one man, one dog, and a promise that would soon unravel the truth hidden in a child's silence. Morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, drawing narrow lines across the gray walls of the precinct. The air smelled of coffee, gun oil, and stale exhaustion. Officer Daniels sat at the long metal table, paperwork spread before him. The official report from the rescue. Each line felt like a lie told through routine. Across from him, Lieutenant Briggs leaned back in his chair, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp but disinterested. The man's tone carried the weight of someone who had seen too much and cared too little. "So," Briggs said, tapping the report with a pen. "The girl's safe, no suspects in custody, and the tip went cold. That about right?" Daniels hesitated. "That's the summary, yes." "Good. Then close it." Briggs slid the folder across the table like a dead weight. "We've got bigger things on our plate. The press doesn't need more noise about child trafficking scares that go nowhere." Daniels's jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, it wasn't noise. That girl," Briggs cut him off, "is alive. That's a win in my book. You want to save the world, Daniels, join the clergy. Here we do paperwork." Silence hung between them, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights above. Daniels studied the lieutenant's face. Briggs had a reputation, hard-nosed, efficient, political, but behind that half-smile and cigarette-stained confidence, something felt wrong. Too quick to close, too eager to bury. Daniels slid the folder back but didn't open it. "The scene wasn't clean," he said quietly. "There were footprints, tire tracks, and half a dozen missing items from evidence. None of that's in the log." Briggs shrugged. "Then it's a clerical issue. You know how it goes. New recruits, sloppy work." Daniels leaned forward, voice low. "This isn't a typo, sir. Someone wiped data from the evidence upload. The timestamp skips 2 minutes, right after I found the girl." Briggs's eyes flicked up. "And you think what? Someone inside is playing hide and seek?" "I think someone didn't want us to find something," Daniels replied quietly. Briggs chuckled without humor. You've been on the force long enough to know. Sometimes things get messy. Don't lose sleep over ghosts, son. He stood, smoothing the front of his uniform. Case closed. Take a few days off. Walk your dog. That last line hung heavier than it should have. Daniels's stomach turned. Walk your dog. It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. When Briggs left the room, the door clicked shut with a hollow finality. Daniels sat still for a long moment, staring at the gray metal surface of the table. The reflection of his own weary face looked back at him, eyes rimmed with doubt, shadows of rain and sirens still clinging to his mind. He exhaled slowly, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small memory drive connected to his body cam. The footage from that night was supposed to be standard, just procedure. But when he loaded it onto the precinct terminal, his pulse quickened. Rain, sirens, Rex moving through the dark, the faint glow of his flashlight cutting across the concrete. Then, just before the girl appears, a figure moves out of frame. Only visible for half a second, but enough. Boots, heavy, black, polished, police-grade soles. Daniels froze the frame and leaned closer. The insignia near the heel, faint but unmistakable, was department issue. His department. His throat tightened. No, that can't be right. Rex, lying at his feet, stirred. The dog lifted his head, ears pricking toward the hallway. A low rumble built in his chest, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the air. Daniels looked up. The sound of footsteps approached, steady, deliberate. A shadow passed the frosted glass window of the interrogation room. For a split second, the outline of boots appeared again, the same kind. Rex stood, hackles rising, his gaze locked on the door. The growl deepened, vibrating in his throat. Easy, partner, Daniels murmured, though his own voice betrayed unease. He glanced toward the monitor, still frozen on the frame. Those boots, that insignia, that flash of someone who wasn't supposed to be there. The doorknob turned slightly, just once, then stopped. Daniel's hand went to the holster at his side. The silence that followed was heavy, pulsing. Then, the footsteps retreated, echoing down the hall. Rex's growl faded, replaced by a tense, watchful stillness. Daniels knelt beside him, one hand pressed to the dog's chest, feeling the strong, steady heartbeat beneath fur, still damp from the rain. He whispered, "You felt it too, didn't you?" Rex looked up, eyes sharp, silent confirmation in his gaze. Daniels sat back, heart thudding. Somewhere beyond that door, someone was watching. Someone who had been at that site. Someone who wasn't supposed to exist in the footage at all. He turned back to the screen and replayed the last few seconds, eyes tracing the blurred outline of the boots once more. A sense of betrayal crept coldly into his chest. "Someone from inside," he muttered. "God help us, Rex. It's one of ours." Rex lowered his head, but didn't look away from the door, his muscles still rigid. Outside, the precinct buzzed with normalcy. Phones ringing, laughter, routine chatter. But inside the interrogation room, a different kind of silence reigned. The kind that warned of danger yet to come. Daniels reached forward and shut off the monitor. The screen went black, reflecting his own uneasy eyes. He stood, holstered his weapon, and rested a hand on Rex's neck. "We're not imagining this, are we?" he whispered. Rex's tail flicked once, a silent vow. Daniels looked once more toward the empty hallway, then back at the screen. Somewhere between the lines of rain and static, truth had flickered, just long enough to change everything. The order came down in a single sentence, wrapped in the cold politeness of an email. K9 Unit Rex, scheduled for behavioral reevaluation. Possible instability following recent operation. It arrived less than 24 hours after the meeting in the interrogation room. Daniels read it twice, each word settling like dust in his lungs. He could almost hear Briggs's voice between the lines. Calm, calculated, the kind that cuts you without raising its tone. Rex lay at his feet in the locker room, head resting on his paws, watching his handler's face. The shepherd sensed something before Daniels spoke. Dogs always do. Daniels folded the paper slowly, hands trembling despite his effort to stay composed. "They're saying you're unstable, partner." His voice cracked on the last word. Unstable. Rex lifted his head, brow furrowed in that human way only shepherds manage. A quiet whine, low and uncertain, slipped from his throat. Daniels knelt, brushing a hand along the dog's muzzle. "You did everything right, Rex. You saved that girl. You followed command. You—" His breath hitched. "You saw something they didn't want seen." A knock interrupted. Sergeant Lorne from K9 Services, the kind of man who never looked anyone in the eye when he delivered bad news. "Orders from Briggs," he said, voice clipped. "Rex is due for transport at 0700. Standard evaluation. Nothing personal." Daniels straightened. "He's fine. You know it." Lorne's jaw flexed. "Not my call. Paperwork signed." He hesitated, then added softly, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." The door shut. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, alive, full of everything Daniels wanted to shout but couldn't. He sank back to the bench, elbows on knees, staring at the folded paper. Unstable. The word echoed like a verdict. That night, the kennels were quiet. Too quiet. Rows of metal cages gleamed under the yellow buzz of overhead lights. The air smelled of disinfectant and wet fur. Somewhere down the corridor, another dog barked once, then stopped. Daniels walked slowly past the empty runs until he reached Rex's enclosure. The shepherd rose immediately, tail wagging once before settling again. The sight of Daniels's uniform seemed to calm him. The leash in his hand did not. Daniels opened the gate and stepped inside. Rex pressed against his leg, head tilted in silent question. The officer knelt on the cold floor and wrapped his arms around that broad, familiar neck. The fur was coarse from years of work, still carrying the faint scent of rain and mud from the night of the rescue. "What did you see that night, boy?" he whispered. Rex didn't answer, of course. He only exhaled a deep, slow breath, the kind that carries understanding. His head pushed gently against Daniels's chest until their heartbeats found the same rhythm. The human one stuttered, the canine one steady. Daniels closed his eyes. "You were looking at someone when I found her, weren't you? Before I got there. You knew." His voice broke. "You always know." He thought about the girl's words. Don't let them find it. He thought about the missing barcodes, the boots in the footage, Briggs's flat tone when he said, "Move on." Every thread pointed to something rotting beneath the badge they both wore. And now, they wanted Rex out of the way. The officer rested his forehead against the dog's. They're not just taking you for evaluation. They're taking you out of the picture. Rex gave a soft, sympathetic groan. Not fear, just acknowledgement. His tail brushed the concrete once, twice, steady as a heartbeat. Daniels swallowed hard. "You're the best partner I've ever had. You know that?" The shepherd pressed closer, eyes closing. There was a warmth there, the kind of loyalty that doesn't need language, the kind that burns quiet and deep. Daniels felt it crack something inside him. For all the discipline drilled into him over years of service, nothing prepared him for the helplessness of watching something pure being taken apart by bureaucracy. He stayed like that for a long while, man and dog, breathing in rhythm, the hum of the lights the only witness. Outside, rain began again, soft against the roof, as if the world itself wanted to speak, but couldn't. When Daniels finally stood, his knees ached. He unclipped the badge from his chest pocket and stared at it, the polished metal catching the kennel's dull light. It looked smaller than it used to. "They can take my badge next if they want," he muttered. "But they don't get to call you broken." Rex tilted his head, waiting for command, as he always did. Daniels smiled sadly. "At ease, buddy. You've done enough." He left the gate unlocked that night. Not out of defiance, but faith. Rex wouldn't run. He never did. Hours bled into dawn. At 0700 sharp, the rumble of an unmarked transport truck broke the morning stillness. Lorne returned with 2 handlers from the evaluation unit. Their steps were efficient, impersonal. Clipboard, leash, signature, procedure. Daniels stood by the gate, back straight, trying to hold the weight in his chest. Rex sat obediently, eyes flicking between the men and his handler. He sensed the tension, but not the betrayal hidden inside it. "Easy, Rex," Daniels whispered, kneeling one last time. He scratched the spot behind the dog's ear where the fur always curled slightly. "You be good, all right? Show them what you're made of." Rex's tongue brushed his chin. A simple gesture of trust that undid every wall Daniels had left. He blinked fast, but the blur wouldn't clear. The leash clicked onto Rex's collar. The shepherd followed the handler without hesitation, disciplined as ever, turning once at the end of the aisle when Daniels called softly, "Rex." For a heartbeat, their eyes locked. Handler and K9, soldier and brother. Loyalty meeting silence. Then the door closed behind him. Daniels stood alone in the echoing kennel corridor. The hum of the lights returned, indifferent. On the concrete floor where Rex had sat, a single strand of fur glimmered in the weak sunlight. He reached down, lifted it between his fingers, and whispered, "We're not done here." Outside, the truck engine started. Metal doors slammed. The sound rolled through the empty hall like thunder, sealing a promise that would soon demand to be broken. The day was supposed to be ordinary. Sunlight spilling across the station courtyard. Banners fluttering with the words, "Community Safety Awareness Week." For the department, it was a photo op. A chance to show families that the men and women in uniform were more than badges and guns. For Officer Daniels, it was a sentence disguised as an assignment. He had been reassigned, just as Briggs promised. No field work, no leads, no mention of the girl, or the missing evidence. His K9 partner, Rex, had returned from evaluation 2 days earlier. Cleared, they said. Perfect scores, they said. But something in the dog's eyes had changed. The trust was still there, but beneath it, a restlessness. the kind of tension that can't be measured on any behavioral form. Daniels adjusted his uniform collar and looked down at Rex, who sat obediently by his side. The shepherd's coat gleamed under the noon light, but his gaze kept sweeping the crowd, alert, searching. The leash hung loose between them, more a bond than a restraint. Children ran past carrying plastic helmets. Parents hovered near the booths. A loudspeaker played the same recorded message about public trust in law enforcement. Daniels forced a smile for the bystanders, letting kids pet Rex, answering questions about obedience training and search drills. He'd done this 100 times. But today, his mind wasn't in the script. Then he saw her. Across the courtyard, half hidden behind a row of volunteers handing out flyers, stood the little girl. Her hair had been trimmed, her clothes cleaner now, but the pallor of her skin hadn't faded. There was something haunting about how still she stood among all that motion. Her hands were clasped together, one gloved in that familiar wool mitten, the other bare. Rex saw her first. His ears shot up, tail stiffened, then wagged once, slow and deliberate. Daniels followed the dog's gaze and froze. The crowd melted away for a heartbeat. When the girl noticed them, she hesitated. Then, step by step, she crossed the open space, weaving through the noise and laughter until she stood in front of Rex. Her small frame trembled, but her eyes, those bright, knowing eyes, held steady. Rex didn't wait for permission. He leaned forward, head low, letting her hand rest on his muzzle. The world around them quieted, as if even the air knew this moment wasn't for show. Daniels felt something shift in his chest. "Hey there," he said softly, kneeling beside them. "Didn't expect to see you here." She nodded, eyes still on Rex. "They said I should come," she whispered, "to say thank you." Her voice had that fragile clarity children sometimes have after surviving storms too big for them. Daniel swallowed a lump in his throat. "He's missed you," he said, forcing a small smile. The girl's fingers trailed gently along Rex's ear. Then, almost under her breath, she said, words the microphone pinned to Daniel's uniform barely caught. "He's the only one who knows." It was so quiet, so tender, that for a moment Daniels wasn't sure he'd heard it right. He glanced at her, but her expression gave nothing away. Only calm, sad certainty. Before he could ask, she did something unexpected. She slipped her hand into her coat pocket, pulled out the single mitten, the same one from that night, and without hesitation, knelt down and slid it onto Rex's paw. The onlookers reacted with soft laughter. "Oh, that's adorable," someone said. "Look, she's dressing him up." Even the event coordinator chuckled. "That's one lucky dog, officer." Daniel smiled back mechanically. But inside, something jolted. The girl's hands were trembling. Not from shyness, but urgency. The kind of shaking that comes when you're doing something that matters. Her gaze flicked up to meet his for a split second. There was meaning there. A message. Silent, but deliberate. And then, it was gone. "Thank you," she whispered to Rex, giving his fur one last stroke. Then she stood, turning toward the waiting social worker who called her name. Rex gave a short, low whine, the kind that sounds like a word left unspoken. Daniels reached down, resting his hand on the dog's back. "It's okay, partner," he murmured, though he wasn't sure it was. As she walked away, Daniels watched the mitten, soft wool wrapped around Rex's paw, absurd and heartbreaking all at once. Everyone else saw a sweet gesture. Only he noticed the tension in her shoulders, the quick glance over her back, the way she clutched her bare hand against her chest. When she disappeared into the crowd, Rex tried to follow, stepping forward until the leash pulled tight. Daniels knelt beside him again, eyes still on the place where she'd vanished. "What was that, huh? What did she mean?" Rex looked up, ears pinned slightly back, tail twitching once. Then he lowered his head to sniff at the mitten, letting out a faint, puzzled huff. Daniels frowned. "You feel it too," he whispered. "Something's not right." The laughter around them returned, the normal rhythm of a community event, bright and harmless. But Daniels couldn't shake the unease coiling in his gut. The mitten wasn't just an act of gratitude. It felt like a message, like the beginning of something. When the event wrapped up, the officers loaded their booths and packed up the patrol cars. Daniels signed off his roster, clipped Rex's leash, and started toward the lot. He should have been exhausted. Instead, his mind raced. That night, back home, he unhooked Rex's collar and hung it beside the door. The shepherd didn't go to his bed as usual. He paced the living room, nails clicking against the floor, tail flicking nervously. "Easy, boy," Daniels said. But Rex ignored him. He moved to the corner, then back, whining softly, a sound Daniels hadn't heard since that night at the construction site. Finally, Rex sat by the doorway, paw lifted slightly, the one still wearing the mitten. He looked at Daniels with something close to urgency. Daniels knelt, heart tightening. "What's wrong?" Rex pressed his paw into Daniels's hand, the wool damp from the dog's breath. His eyes, steady, intent, held Daniels there. In that silence, Daniels felt it again. That invisible thread connecting every strange moment since the rescue. The girl's whisper, the missing evidence, the boots. The way Briggs's voice never matched his eyes, he brushed his thumb over the mitten's rough fabric, feeling a faint ridge along one seam. Something uneven. But before the thought could form, Rex let out a low, uneasy groan and lay down, chin resting on his paws. The room fell quiet, heavy with the weight of something unseen. Daniels sat beside him, staring at the mitten that still clung to the shepherd's paw. Outside, wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint echo of a child's voice. He's the only one who knows. He reached out, touching the mitten one more time. "What did she give you, boy?" he whispered. Rex didn't move, but his tail thumped once, soft against the floor, like the beating of a heart, waiting for the truth to surface. Night folded over the city like a blanket stitched from silence. Officer Daniels sat at his kitchen table, the lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. The hum of the refrigerator filled the empty apartment, steady and low. On the table lay Rex's gear, the harness, the collar, the vest still smelling faintly of rain and sweat. And there, right in the center, was the mitten. It was a small, ordinary thing, frayed at the edges, one seam slightly loose where the wool had begun to unravel. But Daniels couldn't stop staring at it. It had been 2 days since the event, and still, something about it felt wrong. Not the color, not the shape, but the weight. He'd handled enough gear to know when something didn't feel the way it should. Rex lay nearby on the living room rug, head resting on his paws, eyes tracking his handler with quiet intensity. Every time Daniels moved, Rex's gaze followed, patient, expectant, like he was waiting for the moment his human would finally understand. Daniels ran a thumb along the mitten's seam. "You've been restless since that day," he murmured. "You know something I don't you?" Rex's tail flicked once. The officer turned the mitten over again, holding it under the lamp. The stitches were uneven along one side, as if someone had repaired it hastily or hidden something. He frowned. The thread color changed halfway down, barely noticeable unless you looked too closely. That familiar whisper returned. "Don't let them find it." He reached for a small knife from his toolkit and paused, the blade trembling slightly in his hand. "What are we about to find, partner?" Rex stood and came closer, sitting beside him now. The shepherd's head tilted, eyes locked on the mitten. Daniels took a slow breath and carefully slid the blade along the inner seam, separating the wool thread one loop at a time. A small object clinked onto the table. It was a micro SD card, black, thin, smudged with dirt, but unmistakably deliberate. Daniels froze. His pulse quickened. The room seemed to shrink around him. He reached for it carefully, turning it between his fingers. "No way," he whispered. "She couldn't have." But she had. That brave little girl had hidden this, trusting only a dog to carry it safely through the chaos. Daniels rose and crossed the room to his laptop, inserting the card into the reader with trembling hands. The screen flickered, then loaded a folder titled Cam Raid 03. One file, time-stamped for the night of the rescue. He double-clicked. The footage began. Grainy, low light, body cam perspective. The angle looked familiar, as if filmed by one of the responding officers. Daniels leaned closer, heart pounding. The camera swept across the construction site. The scaffolding, the debris, the flashing sirens. Then, as the lens turned, he saw it. Officers standing over boxes, evidence boxes, marked with the same case number he'd logged that night. Only instead of securing them, the men were opening them, pulling files, tossing memory drives into a barrel. One lit a match. Flames flared. Daniels's jaw locked. His breath came shallow. He scrubbed backward on the timeline, trying to catch the face under the flickering light. The figure closest to the fire turned slightly toward the camera. The resolution was poor, but the shape of the jaw, the posture, the glint of the badge under the collar, all of it formed a truth his mind refused to accept. Lieutenant Briggs, the man in charge of the investigation, the man who told him to move on. Daniels's hands trembled as the scene continued. Briggs was barking orders at two other officers, his voice calm, precise, efficient, like a man performing a task he'd done before. "Get it done," he said. "No traces, no files, no leaks." The footage cut out abruptly after that. Just static, then darkness. Daniels leaned back, chest tight. The weight of what he'd seen pressed down like a stone. He pressed both hands over his face, breath uneven. "Jesus!" Rex let out a quiet sound, a small, worried whine, the kind that asked if everything was still okay. Daniels looked down at him, eyes wet, throat thick. "She knew," he whispered. "That kid. She knew they were burning everything. She risked her life just to get this out." He reached out, running a hand over Rex's head. "And she trusted you, Rex. Not us." The dog's ears flicked, head tilting slightly, as if he could feel the ache in the words. Daniels stared at the screen again. Every instinct in him screamed for action, to send the file to Internal Affairs, to storm into Briggs's office, to make someone pay. But training had carved a deeper reflex: to wait, to think, to protect what mattered most. He ejected the card, holding it between his fingers. This is the truth," he said quietly, "and it's going to get us both killed if we're not careful." Rex sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on his handler. No sound, no movement, just that unwavering stare, a living promise of loyalty. Daniel set the SD card back inside the mitten, folding it carefully. "She trusted the right one," he murmured. "You're the only one who'd never betray it." He placed the mitten on the table, next to Rex's vest, the gold K9 patch glinting faintly under the light. For a long while, neither of them moved. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a reminder of a world still turning, still blind to what was happening beneath its surface. Daniels took one last look at the darkened laptop screen, where the frozen image of Briggs lingered like a ghost, and whispered, "It's time to make this right." Rex shifted closer, resting his head on Daniels's knee, eyes steady, waiting for command. For the first time in days, Daniels didn't feel alone. He reached down, scratching behind Rex's ear, his voice breaking but firm. "We're not done, boy. Not even close." The dog thumped his tail once, a quiet yes, and the night pressed in around them, thick with the sound of fate, closing in. Night settled heavy over the city, the kind of night that made everything feel thinner. Walls, trust, breath. Daniels sat in his car under a broken street lamp, engine off, rain sliding down the windshield in uneven streaks. His badge lay on the passenger seat beside Rex's leash. The light caught its edge and threw back a dull reflection. Like it, too, had seen enough. He couldn't go back to the precinct. Not after what he'd seen on that SD card. Briggs controlled the system, evidence, supervisors, the very servers that stored case files. One wrong move and the footage would vanish before sunrise. Rex sat alert in the back seat, eyes fixed on him in the rearview mirror. The dog didn't fidget, didn't whine. He waited, patient as ever, as Daniels made his decision. "Looks like it's just us now, partner," Daniels said quietly. He drove out of town toward the industrial district, where old warehouses leaned into the darkness like tired giants. He parked behind a half-collapsed loading dock and climbed out, laptop in hand. Rain whispered across the metal roof. The only light came from the glow of his screen as he connected to a public Wi-Fi network, bouncing his signal through enough layers of encryption to make it untraceable. Or so he hoped. The file uploaded slowly. Every percentage tick felt like a heartbeat. 12%, 39, 76. Daniels's hands were steady, but his jaw clenched tight. He sent the video to 3 destinations: an encrypted journalist tip line, an anonymous government Dropbox, and a contact he hadn't called in years. A retired detective who'd once told him, "Truth survives best in quiet places." Rex paced near the door, restless. His ears twitched toward the night, catching sounds Daniels couldn't. "Almost done," Daniels murmured. "Hold tight." A faint ping confirmed the upload. Relief surged through him. Brief, fragile. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through the contact list until he found the name of the girl's social worker, Margaret Hale. He hesitated. If Briggs was monitoring outgoing calls, this could expose them both. He switched to a burner app and typed, "Protect the child. Evidence in circulation. Don't trust police channels." Then deleted the message history as soon as it sent. When he looked up, Rex was standing at the doorway, nose lifted, muscles rigid. Daniel's instincts flared. He killed the laptop screen and reached for his sidearm. The dog gave a low, rolling growl, the kind that starts deep, like thunder behind mountains. Headlights flared outside. A black SUV coasted slowly down the street, engine muffled, lights cutting through the rain. Daniels ducked behind a crate, pulling Rex close. "Easy, boy," he whispered, voice tight. "Not yet." The SUV stopped. Two men stepped out, silhouettes, dressed plain but moving with the rhythm of cops. They didn't knock. They split up wordlessly, one heading toward the back entrance, the other sweeping the front. Briggs had found him. Daniels's pulse quickened. He couldn't shoot. Too loud. Too fast. He gestured for Rex to stay low, but Rex's tail stiffened. His whole body leaned forward, trembling not with fear, but readiness. Then came the crunch of gravel, someone stepping just outside the door. Daniels mouthed, "Wait." The door creaked. A beam of light cut into the dark. The second man stepped in, flashlight sweeping across the floor, and froze on the empty chair where the laptop had been. That was all the time Rex needed. The shepherd exploded from the shadows, a flash of muscle and fury. The man barely managed to shout before Rex hit him full force, jaws locking around his forearm. The flashlight crashed to the floor, rolling, muzzle. Flashes followed. 2 shots, wild, deafening in the enclosed space. One hit the wall. The other sparked off the concrete inches from Daniels's shoulder. "Rex, down!" Daniels barked, firing once. The shot caught the second man's shoulder as he entered, sending him sprawling. Rex released the first man and backed toward Daniels, growling low, eyes burning in the half-light. Daniels grabbed the dog's harness. "We're leaving!" They sprinted through the side door into the rain. The alley stretched out before them, slick and narrow. Behind, the men shouted into radios. "Split up!" one yelled. Rex barked once, sharp, warning. Daniels ran, boots slamming against the pavement, lungs burning. A bullet ricocheted off a dumpster to his right. Another grazed the wall. He turned a corner and nearly lost his footing. Rex right beside him, never breaking stride. "Go, go, go!" Daniels urged. They cut through an open gate, emerging behind a row of abandoned shipping containers. He crouched, breathing hard, scanning for movement. The rain came harder now, masking sound, but not entirely. Rex stiffened again. A figure loomed at the far end of the row, gun raised, steady. The muzzle flashed. Daniels didn't have time to react. Rex lunged. The impact knocked Daniels sideways, his weapon flying from his hand. The shot tore through the air and struck Rex. The sound that left Daniels' throat wasn't a word, wasn't even human. It was pure, raw pain. "Rex!" The dog staggered but didn't fall immediately. He turned on the shooter with a snarl that rattled the night. Daniels grabbed his sidearm from the ground and fired twice. The gunman went down hard. Rain hammered everything now: metal, concrete, blood. Daniels dropped to his knees beside Rex, hands shaking as he pressed against the wound along the shepherd's flank. Warm blood seeped through his fingers. Too fast. "Stay with me, boy," he pleaded. "You hear me? You stay!" Rex's breathing came in shallow bursts. His eyes found Daniel's face, unwavering, even as his body trembled. "You saved me," Daniels whispered, voice breaking. "Again." The sirens began in the distance, faint, growing closer. Whether they were Briggs's men or someone else, he didn't care anymore. He tore off his jacket and wrapped it around Rex's side, cradling him close. Rex gave a faint, weak whine, half pain, half defiance. Daniels could almost hear what it meant. Keep moving. I know, he said softly, tears cutting through the rain on his face. We're not done yet. He lifted Rex into his arms, the dog's weight heavy but familiar, like carrying years of loyalty. Under the flashing red glow from the distant skyline, Daniels disappeared into the dark with his wounded partner, hunted, but unbroken. The road ended where the forest began, a single dirt path swallowed by trees and rain. Daniels guided the car off the trail, headlights cutting briefly across a small cabin, forgotten by time. The wood was gray with age, the windows dark. He killed the engine, listening to it tick down to silence. In the back seat, Rex whimpered faintly. The shepherd's fur was matted with blood, breath coming shallow, uneven. Daniel's hands shook as he lifted him gently, jacket still pressed against the wound. Almost there, buddy, he murmured. Just a little longer. The cabin door creaked open to a world of dust and echoes. The smell of old pine and damp wood filled the air. Daniels laid Rex down on an old rug near the fireplace, grabbed a rusted pot from the counter, and filled it with water from a leaking tap. The water ran rusty for a moment, then cleared. He worked with quiet precision, cleaning the wound, tearing a strip from his undershirt to bandage it. Rex didn't flinch, didn't whine. His eyes stayed fixed on Daniels, full of pain and something deeper. The same unspoken faith that had carried them through every fire. When it was done, Daniel sat back against the wall, exhaustion catching up to him. His clothes were soaked, his hands raw. The room glowed faintly from the single oil lamp he'd lit, throwing soft halos across the walls. On the table beside him sat the laptop, its battery blinking red. He opened it, the light bathing his face in pale blue. The SD card rested beside the keyboard. He hesitated before sliding it in. The screen came alive. The same footage, the same betrayal. Briggs, the fire, the lies. Daniels pressed record. His reflection appeared in the corner of the screen, unshaven, eyes hollow, but steady. My name is Officer Daniel A. Daniels, he began, voice low, steady despite the tremor underneath. Badge number 22147. I'm recording this because by the time anyone hears it, the truth will already be bigger than me. He paused, glancing at Rex. The dog's chest rose and fell shallowly, the steady rhythm of a warrior losing blood, but refusing surrender. Daniels swallowed. The truth belongs to her, he continued softly. To the brave ones who can't speak for themselves. The little girl from the raid. She saw everything. She carried this evidence, risked her life to protect it. And I almost let the system bury her voice. His throat tightened. He looked at the badge on his chest, then unpinned it slowly. The metal felt heavier than ever. We wear this, he said, holding it up to the light, to serve justice. But justice isn't paperwork. It's not the chain of command. It's what we owe to the ones who trust us, even when we don't deserve it. He turned to Rex. The shepherd lifted his head weakly, eyes glinting in the dim light. You never needed one to be a hero, Daniels whispered. He placed the badge gently on the floor beside Rex's paw. The dog's paw shifted, resting over it like a final vow. The sight broke something in him. The tears came silently, hot, unrelenting. He leaned forward, forehead against Rex's, and whispered, "Stay with me, buddy. Just stay." Rex's breath hitched, then steadied again, faint, but alive. Outside, thunder rolled low through the mountains. The storm hadn't stopped. It had only moved closer. Daniels wiped his eyes, hit upload, and sent the recording into the same encrypted channels. This time he added a note. To Internal Affairs. To any journalist who still remembers what truth means. The evidence is real. The cover-up runs deep. Don't let them bury it again. He closed the laptop and sat in the quiet. The world outside was still. No sirens yet. No engines. Just the whisper of rain against the roof and the faint crackle of the oil lamp. Minutes passed. Then headlights cut through the forest, slow and deliberate, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Daniels tensed, reaching for his gun. But then he saw the reflection of the IA emblem on the vehicle's windshield. Internal Affairs. The truth had made it. He stood slowly, relief and disbelief colliding in his chest. Outside, doors slammed. Voices called. "Officer Daniels, drop your weapon. Step outside." He didn't move right away. Instead, he looked at Rex one last time. "You did it, partner," he whispered. "You brought it home." Rex's eyes fluttered open just long enough to meet his. His tail brushed once against the floor. Daniels pressed his forehead to the shepherd's again. "Good boy," he breathed. "Good boy." The sirens grew louder, blue and red light spilling through the cracks in the walls. He stepped toward the door, opening it slowly, raising his empty hands. Rain swept in, cool and sharp, washing over his face like absolution. Behind him, the laptop screen blinked. Upload complete. The file labeled CamRaid 03 had reached its destination. He heard the officers shouting commands, felt their hand grab him, their words muffled by the roar of the storm. None of it mattered, because somewhere behind him, inside that quiet, broken cabin, lay the truest part of the story. A wounded dog beside a badge, and a man who finally understood what justice meant. As the sirens began to fade, Daniel's legs gave out. He sank to the mud, eyes on the streak of dawn bleeding through the clouds. He didn't fight it this time. He let the tears fall freely. "The truth belongs to her," he whispered again, voice trembling through the rain. "And to you, Rex. Always to you." Weeks passed, but the world hadn't quite settled. The story of the leaked footage had spread faster than Daniels could have imagined. First, through quiet corners of the internet, then across every major news outlet. Police corruption, evidence destroyed, whistleblower in critical condition, and finally, the part no one could ignore. A canine's loyalty exposes the truth. Now, the courthouse stood under a sky scrubbed clean by morning rain. Cameras lined the steps, their red lights blinking like restless eyes. Inside, the air felt dense, full of whispers, full of waiting. Daniels sat in the back row of the courtroom, his arm still bandaged, his face pale but steady. He wasn't in uniform anymore. The badge he'd once worn lay in an evidence bag somewhere, stripped from him pending review. He didn't care. His gaze wasn't on the judge or the lawyers. It was on the little girl sitting at the witness stand. She looked smaller than he remembered, but somehow stronger. Her hair was neatly tied back, her hands folded carefully in her lap. On the table beside her lay a pair of new mittens, bright red, handmade, though only one rested on her hand. The other was bare, fingers curled slightly as if holding something invisible. Daniels knew why. She kept the other mitten as a memory. For Rex. When she took the oath, her voice trembled, but didn't break. I promise to tell the truth. The prosecutor, a calm woman with sharp eyes, approached gently. Sweetheart, she said softly, can you tell the court what you saw that night? The girl hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the audience, searching. When they found Daniels, she paused. He gave a small nod. Nothing exaggerated, just enough. Her shoulders straightened. I saw men, she began, voice barely above a whisper. They wore badges. They said they were there to help, but they started burning things. Papers, boxes. One of them said, no leaks this time. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Briggs, sitting at the defense table, didn't flinch. His face was stone, hands clasped in front of him, the picture of practiced calm. But his jaw tightened once, a tiny crack in the armor. And how did you get the video? The prosecutor asked. The girl looked down at her lap. One of the men dropped something, a small camera. Her fingers twisted the edge of her mitten. I took the memory card and hid it. I knew they'd check me, so I gave it to the dog. The police dog. Her eyes lifted again, and for the first time, they filled with tears. I trusted him. I knew he wouldn't tell. The entire room fell silent. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. Daniels felt his throat tighten. Beside him, a uniformed officer whispered, That's your dog, right? Rex? He nodded once, eyes never leaving the girl. The prosecutor smiled gently. And what did the dog do? He came back, the girl said softly. He found the right man. She turned again toward Daniels. He found him. The defense attorney stood, trying to regain control. Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. Overruled, the judge said quietly. The prosecutor stepped back. Your Honor, at this time the prosecution would like to introduce Exhibit 12. A technician wheeled in a monitor. The lights dimmed slightly. The footage began to play. The same footage Daniels had seen that night in the cabin. The screen flickered with static, then sharpened into the dim outline of the construction site. The crowd leaned forward. Every sound, the rain, the shouts, the crackle of fire, filled the room. And then came the image no one could unsee. Briggs, standing beside the burning barrels, his voice clear. Get it done. No traces, no leaks. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, chaos. Reporters scrambled, pens scratching, phones flashing. Jurors exchanged stunned looks. The prosecutor turned to the judge, calm but firm. Your Honor, the state rests its case. Briggs's lawyer rose, shouting objections that sounded hollow now, drowned beneath the noise. The bailiff called for order, gavel striking wood again and again. But the sound that cut through it all wasn't the gavel. It was the sudden rustle from the back of the room as someone opened the side door. Every head turned. Rex walked in. He moved slowly, still stiff from his wound, fur clipped around the stitches, but proud. A handler guided him, but the shepherd's eyes found Daniel's instantly, tail flicking once. The courtroom fell into reverent silence. Daniels rose without thinking, his throat closing around something that wasn't quite a sip. The girl gasped softly and smiled through her tears. The judge, an older man who'd seen too much of human corruption, removed his glasses and murmured, "Bring him forward." The handler nodded, leading Rex up the aisle. Cameras flashed again, but no one dared speak. When Rex reached Daniels, he stopped, sat down, and pressed his head gently against his handler's leg. The same quiet loyalty, as always. Daniels knelt, one hand on the dog's neck. "You made it, buddy," he whispered. "You did it." The judge looked down from the bench, voice low but warm. "For the record," he said, "this court acknowledges the contribution of K-9 Unit Rex in the recovery of key evidence and the exposure of departmental misconduct." Applause broke out. Not loud, but real, raw. The kind that starts small and grows when people remember what courage looks like. Daniels blinked hard, fighting to keep his composure. Briggs, meanwhile, sat motionless, face pale, as the bailiffs approached to escort him away. The mask was gone. The girl stood from the witness chair, one mittened hand pressed to her chest. As Briggs was led past her, she whispered something only he could hear. He didn't respond. When it was over, Daniels turned to her. For a moment, the world seemed to slow. No cameras, no noise, just the two of them and the dog between. She walked up to Rex, knelt, and touched his paw. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You found the truth." Rex licked her fingers once, tail brushing the floor. Daniels looked at her bare hand, then at the new mittens. He understood then. She'd replaced them, but she still kept one missing. Not for loss, but for remembrance. He smiled softly. "He'll never forget you," he said. She looked up. "I know." The judge adjourned the session. Reporters surged toward the exit, shouting questions, but Daniels didn't hear them. He stayed there, hand resting on Rex's shoulder, eyes damp, but steady. In that moment, the noise of the courtroom faded into something quiet and pure, a kind of peace that only comes after the truth has been set free. Spring came softly that year, as if the world itself had taken a breath after holding it too long. The air in the park was clean and warm, carrying the faint scent of grass just beginning to grow again. Children laughed in the distance, their voices threading through the sound of birdsong. For once, there were no sirens, no shouting, no fear. Officer Daniels walked along the gravel path, one hand resting on the leash, the other in his jacket pocket. Beside him, Rex moved slower now. The limp still faint from the wound, but his head held high, his stride proud. Every step made a soft crunch beneath their feet, a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. "Easy, partner," Daniels murmured. "We're not chasing anyone today." Rex huffed through his nose, tail swaying lazily. The sunlight caught the streaks of gray in his fur, scars of loyalty, worn like medals. They passed the pond where ducks floated lazily, past the old bench where Daniels used to sit during training breaks, watching rookies run drills. He hadn't realized how much quieter life had become since the trial, since Briggs's conviction, since the noise of it all had finally died down. Now there was just peace, the kind that comes only after you've seen what almost broke you. Daniels stopped beneath an oak tree and sat on the bench, unhooking Rex's leash. The shepherd circled once, then lay down beside him, head resting on his handler's boot. Daniels reached down, absently scratching behind his ear. "You did good, buddy. You really did." Rex's tail brushed the ground, a slow, content rhythm. It was then that he heard the light patter of small footsteps, quick, familiar. He turned. The girl was running toward them across the field, sunlight dancing in her hair. She was taller now, healthier, her cheeks touched with color. She carried a small wooden box in both hands, careful not to drop it as she came closer. "Mr. Daniels?" she called out. He smiled, standing to meet her. "Hey there. Didn't expect to see you today." She stopped a few steps away, catching her breath, smiling shyly. "Mom said it's okay. I wanted to bring him something." Daniels's gaze softened. "You didn't have to, sweetheart. He's already got everything he needs." The girl shook her head and opened the box. Inside lay a pair of hand-knitted mittens, one larger, one smaller. The yarn was the same soft gray as before, but this time the stitches were stronger, neater, lined with careful red trim. "One for me," she said, holding up the smaller one, "and one for Rex." Daniels felt his throat tighten. "You made these?" She nodded proudly. "With my mom, so we don't lose each other again." The words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment he couldn't speak. He just watched her kneel in front of Rex, who sat up, tail thumping gently. The girl slipped the larger mitten over his paw, just as she had once before, all those weeks ago when everything was still dark and uncertain. But this time her hands didn't tremble. "There," she whispered. "Now you can't forget me." Rex leaned forward and pressed his paw gently against her mitten, careful, deliberate. The touch was soft, but it carried the weight of everything that had passed between them. The fear, the courage, the trust. The circle finally closed. Daniels blinked back, the moisture clouding his vision. "I don't think he ever could," he said quietly. The girl smiled, looking up at him. "He still remembers, doesn't he?" Daniels nodded. "Every bit of it." For a moment, none of them spoke. A breeze moved through the trees, scattering petals across the grass like pale confetti. Rex lifted his head, nose twitching toward the wind. Alert, alive, peaceful. Daniels watched him, thinking about the years they'd shared. Every call, every chase, every narrow escape. He'd once believed that loyalty was duty, that a badge was what gave a man purpose. But watching the dog beside him, he understood now. Loyalty wasn't sworn. It was lived. Rex nudged the girl's hand once more before settling down, curling beside her feet. She laughed softly, stroking his fur. Daniels looked up at the sky, at the slow drift of clouds across the blue. He thought about the little girl's voice from that first night. Don't let them find it. About the way she'd trusted a creature that couldn't speak, and how that trust had saved them all. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small and tarnished, his old badge. It caught the light, reflecting a faint glint of gold. He turned it over once, then slipped it back into the box with the mittens. "Keep it," he said. "It belongs with you two now. You're the reason it still means something." The girl nodded solemnly, closing the lid. Rex shifted, resting his head on Daniels's knee, eyes half closed. Daniels smiled, running a hand over his back. "Take it easy, partner," he whispered. "You've earned your rest." The girl looked up. "Will he still work with you?" Daniels chuckled softly. "No, I think he's retired. But between you and me, he never really stopped working. He just changed what kind of work it is." She tilted her head. "What kind?" "Reminding people what loyalty looks like." The breeze picked up again, lifting the sound of laughter from the playground nearby. The girl slipped her mittened hand into Daniel's, her other hand resting on Rex's back. Together, they watched the pond glimmer under the sunlight, a picture of quiet completion. As the scene stretched out, the world seemed to exhale around them. Rex's eyes fluttered shut for a moment, his breathing deep and calm. Daniels listened to it, steady, reassuring, and let himself breathe in sync. A soft voice, his own or maybe memory, rose like a closing note. Sometimes truth travels not in words, but in the quiet loyalty of those who cannot speak. The wind carried the line away across the park, through the sunlight, past the trees, leaving only the sound of peace and the slow rhythm of footsteps as a man, a dog, and a little girl began their last walk together. When you've shared your life with a dog, truly shared it, you know what real loyalty feels like. It's not about commands or training. It's about quiet moments. The way a German shepherd rests his head on your knee after a long day. The way he listens, even when you say nothing at all. Stories like Rex's remind us that love isn't always spoken. Sometimes, it's carried in the eyes of the ones who wait for us, trust us, and never give up. If this story touched something in you, maybe take a little time to explore ways to grow that same bond with your own dog. There's a wonderful resource I came across that helps deepen understanding and connection. I'll leave it here for you to check out if you'd like. No pressure, just something that felt worth sharing. Because at the end of the day, what we give our dogs, patience, kindness, love, they give back 1,000-fold. And if you're lucky enough to be loved by one, you already know what that means.